Well, thank you for the opportunity to ask some questions about the budget, and thank you for all the staff for being here today. It's great to see. Yesterday during the infrastructure questions, it was all women across the table. It was really great to see. Yeah. So just a couple of things that I wanted to say. First of all, I think the work that you do is really important. I think you're doing a remarkable job. I do want to dig into stuff a little bit, and I was struck by a little bit of irony when you said the status of women plays a supporting role to other ministries. I would love to see the ministry elevated, and then I would love to see the ministry not necessary any longer. So let's hope those things happen quite quickly. And also, I think the work that you're doing, that the ministry does in terms of violence against women, is some of the most important work that we can do, freeing women and girls from the fear of violence and sexual violence. Frees up so much creativity and opportunity, and I can't stress that enough, how important it is. And I also appreciate the work that you're doing specifically with women in STEM. I see lots of opportunity for women in non-traditional areas, and especially the Alberta Women's Science Network and Sheet Geek. I'm really pleased to see that. So, into the questions. On page 137, one of the ministry's 3 areas of work is advancing gender equality in women's economic security. And I think overall, probably one of the biggest challenges
of the business plan. Sorry, I'm just wanting to...
Okay, sorry. I think probably one of the biggest challenges is to quantify the impact of the work that you're doing. So a lot of my questions will be around that. And for this line in particular, how many women has your ministry helped to move out of a lower economic status? Where are they located geographically? Do you understand rural versus urban, and is that proportionate? And what are the demographics of those women?
So, first of all, I'd like to just take the opportunity to respond to the your comment around the irony of a supporting role and liking to see us elevated. I agree. I always want to see status of women elevated. However, the type of ministry that status of women is in line with all other jurisdictions as to how these ministries function. And so we are modeled very much after the same model that you would find in relatively any other jurisdiction with women's machinery in it, and certainly the Premier and Executive Council elevate this issue and want to see it elevated in all of the work we do, which is why it has become mandatory to have a gendered analysis on all cabinet reports, and frankly why there is such a demand and uptake for gender-based analysis training. To your specific question, I would love to be able to provide you with that data. However, data collection is a significant issue with respect to evaluating impacts for women and women's experience. So, so much so that the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation created an entire multi-million dollar granting arm to provide funding to research to provide disaggregated data. We are currently at the point of encouraging departments through the GBA Plus lens to understand the value of disaggregated data and to engage in disaggregated collection from the outset when they're doing public consultation and engagement, or where they do data collection directly. So this is still very much a challenge for us to be able to provide the kind of data that you're looking for. And unfortunately, we're largely reliant on federal and non-disaggregated data from which we need to extrapolate.
Great, thanks. That actually brings up a question that I was going to ask a little bit later, but it seems appropriate now. On page 142, performance indicator 2B, rate of self-reported sexual assault for Albertans 15 years and older, quadrennial survey, and then it notes 1 and 2. Note number 2, available data is not disaggregated by gender. Note that rates of sexual violence are significantly higher for women. Indicator to be used as a proxy until an Alberta specific annual indicator is developed. Mm-hmm. Is that something that's under development right now?
So I'm just going to clarify. The indicators. Sorry, we're just wondering, you're referring to performance indicator 2B?
Yep, 2B, and note number 2.
Yes.
Indicator to be used as a proxy until an Alberta specific annual indicator is developed.
So this is not a status collects, right? Yes. Okay. So this data comes from the General Social Survey that the federal government puts out, and it. Sorry, I'm going to clarify what the source means. Due to the gender-based violence. Okay, but they don't put this out just yet, right? Also, that they plan to. Yeah, they're working on that. Yeah. So the federal government, Status of Women Canada, is working on a gender-based violence survey, but it is not in existence yet. And so currently the survey that we get this result from the federal department is conducted every 5 years. They are aware that there is a problem in the fact that the data is not disaggregated, but it's the best we have.
And from that last sentence in note number 2, are there any plans for Alberta to be gathering this kind of data on their own?
And we do work together on some projects with community and social services, for example. The Alberta Council of Women's Shelters does a survey on men's attitudes, for example, and provides that. And so we do some specific funding on certain areas of disaggregated data collection and monitoring. But that being said, we're heavily reliant on grassroots and community research that's being done, and we participate wherever possible. But that being said, this again is a capacity issue. We only have 2 individuals in our researcher department, so having additional capacity would allow us theoretically to be able to do that, but unfortunately we don't have the capacity to engage in that kind of high-level qualitative research.
Okay, thanks. I think that speaks to your comment earlier about the Status of Women Ministry being based on other models, and this is probably an excellent opportunity to create your own model, because that data is super important in driving the kinds of policies that you're making meaningful change now, but to be able to dig into that even deeper and understand how much more of an impact you can make.
We would absolutely love to have additional FTEs in our research group, but the economic realities are what they are, unfortunately, at the moment. We're very pleased to be able to have the country's first standalone Status of Women organization in Canada. So
on page 138, second paragraph talks about focusing on 4 key areas, including GBA+, and I have some questions around that. I was happy to hear your number of people in the government of Alberta who have been trained, so 3,900. Do you understand as a percentage of the total of GOA employees what that is?
I'll just check. We 3,900 or 27,000. Yeah, it's approximately 11 or 12%.
Okay, and do you have a goal? for how many percent of GOA employees you want to have GBA plus training?
Well, our goal in the estimates is to have that up to, 6,000? Yeah, 6,000 for the next year.
Okay, but as a percentage of the total, do you?
So that would bring that would double the percentage rate. So that would bring us up to approximately. Right, you're right. Yeah. So that would. Okay, it's not cumulative. Okay, yeah. So that would be, 9,000 of 27,000 employees approximately.
And do you have an end goal where you see 95% of all employees having been GBA plus trained eventually?
We have not reported that in these estimates. We're just not there yet.
Okay. All right. Thanks. And do you ever envision there being an HR rollout component of it? I know you've spoken about train the trainer, so within specific ministries, but for GOA overall, do you see that being a function of HR?
The HR department is under the Department of Finance, and given that we are the Center of Excellence, we do not anticipate that role being transferred to the Department of Finance.
Okay, thanks. Now, in terms of collecting data around GBA plus, it's kind of tricky, and compliance with different types of regulation, I would think, might get in the way of some data collection. So I'm wondering, the data that you have collected in terms of FOIP and PIPA, have these been taken into consideration?
Can you clarify your question? I'm a bit thrown off with FOIP and PIPA being added to that.
Is the data that you're collecting about GBA plus anonymous data? Is it just simply this many people have been trained? Does it go into any kind of record keeping about those particular people? Is it something that you can directly relate to an individual?
So the majority of the data collection, the majority of the training that's being done around GBA Plus is Government of Alberta employees. And so we keep percentages of the, sorry. Yeah. We keep general percentages, but we rely upon individual departments to essentially ensure that they have GBA plus individuals who are trained to do the policy analysis as it's required on the cabinet reports, and so that provides the accountability mechanism. So in the event that an individual is transferred from one department to another, but they happen to be their GBA plus analyst, that department would need someone new trained in, and then they would come to one of our training sessions.
Okay, thanks. And then the centers of responsibility across the ministries. So I have been asking about this in the different estimates meetings, and it seems that not everybody is really clear about whether they have one within their ministry or not. And there were two in particular. Infrastructure, I think, was one of them, and the other was Treasury Board and Finance, who it didn't seem like there was a center of excellence, responsibility. And I'm wondering, is there a date that you expect that to be completed by?
So all 22 ministries have an established GBA Plus Center of Responsibility, and they're at different levels of operating. So the 80% target for 2018-19 represents being more fully operational in terms of staff involvement, GBA Plus training, and implementing GBA Plus frameworks. So as indicated, there's varying levels of the numbers of employees in any particular department that is involved in the Center of Responsibility, and so that's why we have the 80% target for 2018-19, so that we can essentially beef up the capacity within each department. So for example of where we've made some headway in infrastructure in particular, is that capital planning submissions now ask whether or not a GBA plus analysis has been completed. And so it's unfortunate that perhaps the individuals who were at the table were not able to speak to that, but infrastructure absolutely does have a GBA plus center of responsibility.
Great, thanks very much. On page 138, there's a section on women's economic security, and it mentions early learning and childcare, which of course are super important. How has childcare access at GOA workplaces improved or been supported?
Sorry, how is childcare?
Right, so at a GOA workplace, how has access to childcare improved?
So we are working in respect of improving access to childcare through our $25 a day early learning and childcare centers. And so this is an opportunity that all Albertans, regardless of where they work, have access to. And this is something that we do in collaboration with Children's Services. And co-led the policy development, and so we started out with 22 early learning childcare centers, creating nearly 1,300 affordable childcare spaces across the province, and there was a number of them in Edmonton that were initially approved, where the vast majority of GOA staff work and live. But this is a program that we are expanding, and so it will create up to 78 additional early learning and childcare centers with an additional 4,500 affordable childcare spaces. That being said, within the GOA, and I might ask, I believe, Lisa to assist me with this as well. We have worked with a number of departments on a flexible work. Is this fall under you? Yeah. On a flexible work, essentially plan and policy. So would you be able to summarize that a little bit better than me, Lisa? Thanks.
So recognizing that one of the barriers for women working in government is some of the other responsibilities they might have, whether it's elder or childcare, we've been working as part of the Diversity and Inclusion Initiative to look at flexible work arrangements being more widely available and acceptable across government, so that accommodations could be made to the usual hours of work to accommodate some of those childcare or other care type of responsibilities.
Thanks. And how about any on-site daycare initiatives within the GOA?
Are there any locations that have them? Yeah, we'd have to get that information from Children's Services, but that wouldn't fall under our ministry, so perhaps you might want to inquire for them.
Great, thanks. $25 a day childcare, I know you just mentioned that. 78 new locations or daycares in 4,500 spaces, is that in the next year?
That is my understanding.
And that's through Children's Services?
Oh, sorry. The agreement allocates $136 million over 3 years for the investments. So I don't have the detail from Children's Services whether or not that is for setup in this year and then ongoing funding for 3 years, or how that's exactly being allocated. We were more part of the policy development in the structure and how that was created, but in terms of the additional rollout, that falls properly under Children's Services.
Okay, great.
Yep.
There's only about 40 seconds left, so I'll just cede the time and pick it up next time. Thanks.